You okay?
Okay, Milestone 2, I set up in a similar format for, you're welcome. I set up in a similar format. If you're looking to use the template, I think it makes it, again, I think it makes it a lot easier and that you don't have to, having the questions in there provides a great baseline for making sure you answered everything while you're typing it out. It gives a good gauge as to what you're looking for. I also include some guidance in the template itself, so it's not just the questions. So I strongly encourage it, but it's not a requirement. It's just something, there's a very strong correlation between those that use this information and a better grade. So I suggest it. All right, first question to look at for Milestone 2 is theory of constraint. Is anyone else able to hear my audio? Can someone just verify that to see if it's a me issue? Okay, Kathy can hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Andrew.
Okay, so for Zelina, I think that might be on your end. Do you have everything set up for audio, so you have either headphones or speakers, something of that nature?
Dan, why are you being a punk this morning? Do what you normally do. You want to come down with me?
I do ask if you're not asking a question, if you could put yourself on mute, that'd be great. I think that's Eric there in the background. Zelina, are you able to hear yet? I hope you are. I got to move on though I think that we're all good on our end. So in the theories of constraint section, you're going to type out just a couple sentences to start off on what theories of constraint is. Page 306 is going to be your best source from our text. So a couple sentences here on what theories of constraint is. It's just the idea that the weakest link of your chain, if you will, is the strongest you can be. Kind of a extrapolation of the idea that the herd is only as fast as its slowest member. That's the concept for theories of constraint. So every time you improve the weakest link, the slowest member, whatever the case may be, you improve it overall. So that's the general idea of theory of constraint. And we focus to improve your organization. Theory of constraint takes a focus at the weakest link, fixes it, and then what's the next weakest link? Your steps in it are listed on page 306. So after a brief introduction on what theory of constraint is, then you're going to do an example. Now this example, a lot of students get hung up on that they try to go too big picture. Theory of constraint is something that's applied on a micro level. So if you're thinking, we'll think of it for Nissan, and we're looking at assembly line, or we're looking at their supply chain, whatever the case may be, you don't want to just say the constraint is that they have a complex supply chain. Let's look at the theory of constraint looks at one small constraint. So the example I like is, let's say your incoming production, your incoming materials, your incoming supplies, if you will, you have a bottleneck where you receive your supplies. Maybe your loading dock isn't set up very well. That's a small constraint. It's not, you won't just say my supply chain is my constraint. That's too big picture for theory of constraint. So it could just be the constraint is we can't offload our supplies fast enough. So that's your step one, identify the constraint. Step two, develop a plan for overcoming the constraint. And your Nissan example would be redesign the layout for our loading dock. We're going to determine how to redesign it. And you go through those steps with that very simplistic example. And you don't have to necessarily say the solve or provide a design or anything like that. But you would be simplistic and just list out the steps on how Nissan would fix it. It's not terribly difficult. You're in text, refer to page 306. If you have a brief introduction to what theory of constraint is, and big picture, again, the idea is that theory of constraint focuses on individual small issues to try to improve the overall, one at a time. So a brief introduction on what theory of constraint is. Go through the steps with an example, so you're going to get all your points. Total quality management. Here I get a lot of very, very vague answers where they'll say something like total quality management is ongoing focus on management. Well, sure, it is, but that doesn't really get to the heart of the matter. Otherwise, you would just say that for any operations management function. TQM is specific in some of the tools that it uses. Look at page 208, and within page 208, you have, you're going to, I think, let me flip to 208 quick. Give me a couple seconds, because I know, excuse me, you're going to have, sorry for the delay, I didn't think I was going to do that, but it makes sense for me to do that. So I'm going to switch to page 208. Is where it starts for TQM, but the most important part is going to be those 7, there we go, no, 212 is better. These 7 concepts for an effective TQM program, make sure to include this sentence, if you will, in your paper, because these are the key components on how your book breaks out TQM. So when you have your vague sentence to start, that's fine. Total quality management refers to an emphasis on this, that's fine. But make sure you include this for the specific, because those are the things that differentiate between TQM and other operations management functions. So then your applicability is going to be some of these tools or some of these steps. So when you move into your applicability component, if you wanted to say something like benchmarking, you could say Nissan would utilize the TQM tool of concept of benchmarking by comparing their operations to companies like Honda and Chevy. That's an example that's very simplistic that shows you understand what benchmarking is and that it is a concept of TQM. If you want to look at a tool as well, a couple examples, some of the tools of TQM are going to be stuff like your scatter plot. They're going to be stuff like your, here we go, here's tools, good tools that are applicable. Your cause and effect diagram. So a good example would be Nissan would use a cause and effect diagram to determine why they're having defects in production of their Altimas. Something of that nature. You only need enough on the example to show that you understand what the tool is and that you're including a tool that's valid for TQM practices. Okay, I'm going to move to the one that causes holistically the most problems with students. It's the biggest difficult component. But I don't think it's necessarily difficult because it's a tough concept to grasp. I think it's difficult because of the tool itself. So I'm going to talk about what the cause and effect diagram is. A cause and effect diagram is a brainstorming tool that allows you to trace a big picture problem down to some specific root causes. This question causes people a lot of problems in that they search the case study for what the problem is. And admittedly, the first time I taught this class, I spent about an hour poring over the case study trying to figure out what problem it was they wanted us to solve before I realized that it was fictitious. You make up your own problem. You're supposed to talk about some newly developed materials, so I kept looking for newly developed materials in the case study and couldn't find anything. So it's something very simple. Think of a problem that has to do with using materials. I like to use windshields as an example because it's very simplistic and it shows that we know what we're talking about. So the problem statement for an example that I like is Nissan's had trouble with their windshields in their Altimas. They're leaking. So when we're looking at something like that, I included an Excel template that makes it so you don't have to do any drawing. You don't have to, because I don't want this course isn't about artwork. This course is about understanding some operation management functions, fishbone diagram being one of them. So In the case for Windows not working right, the first thing you want to look at if you want to do the template is going to be a clear problem statement. Now, this is often a hang-up for students because a problem statement shouldn't involve any solutions, shouldn't involve any causes. So a lot of times if somebody looks at this window issue, the statement would be something like, the windows are leaking because sealant's bad and that causes problems for our customers. That's way too much, way too much. Your problem statement should be very concise. So for the example we're talking about, it would be something like, new windows leak. That's your whole problem. The problem is that my new windows leak. Everything beyond that is going to be considered stuff like solutions, and it's going to be considered root causes. So it's not new windows leak because, it's not new windows leak which causes, it's just new windows leak. That's the problem statement. So what causes, so your next step in a fishbone diagram are the causes. Now these causes can be changed, but they are great for our purposes. So these 6 that are listed here in this template, just leave them. You don't need to take it out because these are your categories that are very, very common in manufacturing. So I usually suggest leaving them. Now when you go to your specific causes, the specific causes that are listed in here don't necessarily relate. So you'll want to clear the causes. But they give you a good example of what sort of things you should be looking for. So those are good examples. But your specific causes here are actually going to be things, so for machine, you got to make sure to relate the specific cause to the issue and the category. So for machines, here it could be poor calibration. Meaning that your windows are being cut the wrong size, they're not set right. For people, it could be something like, aren't trained. Ooh, sorry, I'm not typing all this morning. Aren't trained on new windows. Methods. Varying methods. So when you use this in real life, you're usually standing in a conference room and you're saying, with a whiteboard out in front of you, what are some potential causes under each of these categories? What could be causing the problem? And then you're trying to trace the problem to a root cause. And this is something that I do every once in a while with my projects that I lead. I'm a project manager for the most part, and it's something that I do regularly, and it works as a good brainstorming technique. Because then when you identify the root cause, and what it is, so it's when you identify your root cause, we'll say for this case, it's bad sealer. You know, under your materials, bad sealer, and we'd say that's our root cause for this problem. Let's pause on real world for a second and talk about administrative for your assignment. If you have 5, 6 potential root causes, that should be enough for our purposes. You don't need to try to fill out that whole thing. So when you're looking at all of these specific causes, get about 4 to 6 good ones that are good possibles and they align with the problem statement. That's all you need. If you had one under each, that'd be plenty. So then for our purposes on this paper, we're saying the root cause is bad sealant. So it's not necessarily the window, it's that they're not sealed well. So then you go back to for your discussion here, it's going to be something like, Nissan's new windows aren't working well. Your introduction is going to be Nissan's new windows aren't working well. We did a cause and effect diagram to find out why they're leaking. Then you'll insert your cause and effect diagram here, and you can just do a snippet if you want. You can do an embedded Excel, so you just save it and it folds back in if you use the template. And then you're going to have a sentence or two that says what your outcome of the root cause analysis was. So you did your fishbone diagram, and then you're going to come back to this and say, we did our fishbone diagram and determined that it looks like a bad sealer is the problem. Another potential problem is this. And that's what you need for this section. That I know is one that gives people problems, so I'm going to pause and give a second here for anyone that has some questions on that. I know that's kind of a bigger section that people have had some problems with. So who's got some issues with the fishbone I can help them with?
It says, actually, it said 2-hour span.
What was that? I'm sorry?
No.
I'm sorry, I missed that question. Somebody had typed a question. What was that again? We as the OM manager decide what the root cause is? Yeah, that's the exercise. So you're finding the hypothetical root cause. So you draw out your fishbone and then you pick one and you say why you think it's the root cause. So in our examples, it would be based on this cause and effect diagram, we believe the root cause to be a poor sealant and we'll investigate to solve that root cause. Any other questions on this cause and effect diagram? Because, like I said, I know this can be a difficult one.
How can we get a template for the fishbone?
That is embedded within the document. So do you have the template that I sent out, or do you want me to send that to you?
Could you please?
Yeah. Can you go ahead and type out in your chat window your email address, and I'll send all of them to you?
Yeah, because I had to. I'm on my laptop, but I couldn't have. I had problems with the audio, so I called in also.
Okay. If you want to, are you able to use the chat window and just type in your email address? I'll copy paste it over and
Yes.
have the template to you in a matter of seconds.
Yes, I can do that. I just can't. I couldn't hear anything, so I decided let me call in and still, be able to see the chat.
Okay. You want to put your email address in there?
I sent it. It went to Andrew privately.
All right, that's been sent to you. You should have that in a matter of a couple seconds. You'll have the template.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Okay, thanks.
Now, within the template, this fishbone diagram, this Excel macro that I've got, is actually embedded. So you'd open the template, and right where it's at, all you have to do is double-click. And as long as you've got a moderately recent version of Excel, that should open right up for you. And then when you make the adjustments, you just save, and it closes back into the template, or you can take a snippet, whatever you want. But you can just leave it like this, and your professor will be able to open and grade accordingly.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Before I move on, any other questions on the fishbone diagram? Okay. Now we're going to move on to the process time function map. This is one that sometimes trips people up as well. But if you use your course text, it shouldn't be too difficult because the course text has a great example for exactly what we want. And it's on page 280. And when I say a good example, I mean like almost to the point. Now, obviously, you don't want to just copy paste it, but you want to replicate it within Excel. It's the easiest way to do it. So page 280 of your text, and I'll actually go ahead and pull that up so I can show you what I'm talking about. Give me a couple seconds here. This is the process map that you're looking for. You do not have to have necessarily these symbols. If you think of this as Excel, just think of it as an Excel formula. I mean, it's a little Excel sheet. Just putting the information within the box from here is all you need. So take Excel, think of the steps here that are going to be involved in getting a vehicle from the customer back to the customer's order back to being built. So these steps for the most part work. And then your timeline, how long should it take? When you're building this out to make things easy for yourself, you're going to want to put in things like this where it says weight. That weight sort of thing makes it easy for you to call out a problem in the description. So I strongly encourage you to look at page 280 when you're doing your time function map, and then just build it out in Excel. And you can, like I said, just type in the cells what the action is. You don't necessarily have to try to make the fun diagram, if you will. Having the lines and just words in the Excel cell take care of that for you. So for our purposes on the question, it's saying we're going to use a time value map to figure out what's causing the production to be slow. So you would say an introduction sentence of something like, below is a time value map or a time function map for our new manufacturing process. We're trying to figure out how to improve speed. And then you have the time function map from page 280. Again, don't just copy paste it, but recreate something similar in Excel. And then after that, just like with the cause and effect diagram, you're going to have a few sentences on what you found, because we're saying you found the solution. So if you build it like on 280, you're going to have some really easy call-outs in that you built in some weight, if you will. So you will say, in reviewing the time function map, we find that there are areas where there is wait time. We can eliminate that by having production flow through or using just-in-time or whatever the case may be. Just say we're going to eliminate that wait time. There's no reason to have it. And when you eliminate that wait time, of course, your function gets smaller, so you're faster. That is another section that causes some people issues, though. So does anyone have questions on that? I'll be happy to go through that further, but otherwise, I strongly encourage you to look at page 280. Okay, look at the last one for this milestone. This is a weighted average math problem, essentially. It's a story problem where you do some weighted average work. So you can either do it in Excel or just pen and paper, whatever the case may be, but you're taking the weight of the factor times how the factor scored for the city to get a number, and then who gets the highest. So if we're looking at it for Mexico City versus Columbia, South Carolina, it's easy enough that I can just go ahead and pop through this in Excel. If you can't tell, I like Excel. So for this, take all these numbers, shoot them over in Excel. And you're looking at which side is which. Mexico City first, so you got Mexico City. And you got South Carolina. That's your weight, that's your score. So it would just be equals this times this for your point value on that. And Excel is nice, and that it'll fill that function down. And the same thing equals this times this. And Excel's nice, and that'll fill that function down. And now it's a simple total. Who's got more? So we total by sum. Sum for, oh, that's going to be repetitive. Sum here. Sum here. Which one's more? Mexico City. So for our purposes, you can take a snip if you want. You can copy paste. So here's my math, edit copy. Paste it on in. Or you can just do a regular Excel copy paste, whatever you'd like. Include that math, your weighted average showing Mexico City over South Carolina 73-71, and then you just have a couple sentence description. So the description is something like, based on the weighted average for these two alternatives, we determined that Mexico City is the preferable location. keep in mind a decision like this should not be taken lightly and other factors may need to be considered. And that gets you through that section. That section is one that you should get all the points on.
Go ahead. I had picked South Carolina because I thought, I don't want to, Americans need jobs. So I got points taken off because I didn't pick Mexico City. Yeah,
so I'm not going to say holistically I disagree with you, but keep in mind we're jumping through the hoops of an exercise. And the exercise so you'll want to say Mexico City just simply based on the numbers. I don't necessarily holistically disagree with you, but the exercise here is that. So if you update for the final, I'm sure you'll be fine. And then you'll just... Okay. So before I move on to the next milestone, this one is kind of tough from a historical, statistical standpoint. This is the one that has the lowest grade. So I'm happy to go through any of the sections, and the main reason it has the lowest grade is this section and this section. Who's got some questions? Go ahead.
I have a quick question. When I finished my the final project, because I didn't get in onto the beginning because I couldn't hear anything. When I do my final paper, should I put like in an outline sense where you have 1, 2, 3, and so forth to keep it organized?
Yeah, I'll go through the final. I have a template for that too.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay.
Does anyone have any other questions specific to this milestone? Otherwise, I'll move on to the next one.